Over these several months, we've been endeavoring to reconcile several sublime paradoxes. And now we've embarked on another endeavor. But the question that's asked is this endeavor a paradox, or is it a conundrum, or is it a riddle? And that is, form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. If it's a conundrum, it's like a puzzle. We can take it apart and analyze it and put it together. If it's a paradox, we can reconcile it. And if it's a riddle, like removing water from the ear with water, or a thorn with a thorn, we must use riddles to solve the riddle. So, looking at it from this viewpoint, that form is emptiness and emptiness is form, is a riddle, at least to start with in our endeavors. You remember that story about Mulla Nasrudin. Now, Mulla Nasrudin, even though he pretended that he could not read or write. One day he heard that there was a certain fakir, magician in town, who, if he was paid several pieces of silver, could allow someone to read and write. So Mulla Nasrudin went into the town, put the several pieces of silver into the fakir's hand, and the fakir whispered something quite unintelligible in his ear, and the mullah went off home. But several days later, Mulla Nasrudin came running into town, waving a book above his head. "Where is that fakir? Where is that magician?" And the townspeople said, "Oh, he left town yesterday, but can you read and write?" And the mullah said, "Yes, and this book says that all fakirs and magicians are charlatans. Where is he? I want my money back." And then there's a story about a certain Rajah and his trusted advisor, the one who is closest to him. And it so happened that their wives gave birth to sons at exactly the same time. And both of these boys became very, very close friends. They did everything together. And the thing that they loved most of all was to go hunting. They hunted every day. They spent all of their days and lots of their evenings out in the forests, and they decimated the bird population and the animal population, so that the Rajah and his advisor were both very, very distressed, not only about the loss of all the animals and birds, but about the fact that their sons were just spending all their time hunting and not learning about affairs of state and being educated. So they set out an edict for anyone who could break up this friendship. And some of the townspeople came along to try to sever the bond that was between these two young men, but they were totally unsuccessful. But then the Rajah said he would offer several pieces of gold to anyone who could do so. And there was an old woman in town who sort of whispered to several of her friends that she could do that. So they went to the Rajah and told him, and so he had the old woman brought in front of him. Well, she was in fear and trembling, but she said that she could do so if the Rajah would give into her service several able-bodied men. And this was done easily, with the promise that she would be given the gold. And so she took off these 2 men, and she had them make a palanquin. And she put curtains on both sides of the palanquin to hide its contents. And then she had these 2 men shovel fresh dung, highly smelly dung, into the palanquin. Well, then she went with the 2 men who were carrying this palanquin along the road towards the forest where the young men were doing their daily hunting. And the old woman was walking ahead, beating a drum. Well, when the 2 young friends heard the drum, of course, they were very curious as to know what was going on. So they accosted the old woman and the 2 men to ask what it was. And she said, well, put your head in the palanquin. So the Rajah's son put his head in the palanquin and came up with a great whiff of fresh dung. He said, oh, it's terrible, it's terrible. And he said to his friend, oh, it's just dung. And so his friend said, oh, well, let me check. And so he went over to the palanquin, put his head in. Oh, yes, oh. And so they both asked the old woman, what was the meaning of this? And she said, well, I will tell one of you, and then that one can tell the other. So the Rajah's son came over to the old woman, and she put her arm around his neck, and she pretended to whisper in his ear. She said, and so when the Rajah's son went over to his friend said, well, what did she say? What was it? What did she say? And the Rajah's son, she didn't say anything. She just pretended to whisper. And his friend said, don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. Of course she told you something. We've been friends for all of these years, and you've never had any secrets between us. What did she say? And the Rajah said, she didn't say anything. She just pretended to whisper. Don't lie, don't lie. And they both got so angry that the Rajah said, well, that's the end of our friendship. I'm never going to speak to you again. And so it was. They both went their separate ways, but because they went their separate ways, they no longer went hunting, and they each started to undertake some worthwhile endeavors, being educated and learning affairs of state, etc., etc., etc. So, of course, the old woman was given her pieces of gold and lived happily ever after. But we can ask ourselves, and for this we have to dive very deep, remembering that with a riddle, like using water to remove water from the ear, what could this story have to do with our endeavor relative to form is emptiness, and emptiness is form? Looking on it as a riddle for the moment, allowing form is emptiness and emptiness is form to be a riddle for us, using water to remove water from the ear. What could this riddle, this story, do to help us understand the riddle of form is emptiness and emptiness is form. We could ask ourselves, what's the deep meaning of this story? What's its deep meaning for us?
Like we're not joined at the hip to somebody or to some belief. So you just have to recognize who you are and go on your path.
Right on. We can understand that. So no.
Come on.
Yes. Isn't it? What has to be broken down, dismantled in us before we can come to recognize our truths, solve the riddles of our being, the conundrums of our being, the paradoxes of our being? What has to happen for us? What's happened in our lives? The breaking down, the paling away, the powering off of beliefs, conditioning, truths. Isn't this so? So to use water to remove water from the ear, or a thorn to remove a thorn, we can perhaps get a gleaning of what it is that happens for us when we use a riddle to solve a riddle. But let's see where it takes us. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. Thank you.